Hello there, wizards. It is me, Wuz. A little bit of a different video this week. I am traveling this weekend, and so I wanted to put together just something kind of quick. Yeah, so this video is not quick. I didn't get it out last weekend because it took me longer to edit than I thought it was going to, and I was traveling more than I thought I was going to be. And it ended up about 25 minutes. But I have linked all of the timestamps that I can to all of the different sections of the video. Hopefully this is helpful. You don't have to watch it all at once, but if you need to use it as like a reference or you want to come back to it, hopefully it still has some useful tips for you. Thanks for watching. Back to me before I knew how long this was going to take. This video is a quick rundown of how I use Obsidian, the note-taking tool, to manage my session and world building notes. I'm going to walk through a bunch of the different tools that I use with Obsidian, within Obsidian, the different plugins, themes, all of that sort of thing. If you haven't used Obsidian before, it's a great note-taking and knowledge management tool. It's free to use and has an active community that creates great plugins for it. While you don't have to know much to get started with Obsidian, I do recommend learning a bit about the Markdown language, which is how you format things in Obsidian. There are some great general Obsidian courses out there, which I'll link to in the description. So what we're looking at here is my Obsidian workspace for my homebrew world, Carowin. Workspaces in Obsidian are called vaults. It's just their naming convention. I'm currently working on a new version of some of this stuff that's in here, but I decided with that working on new things to move from World Anvil to Obsidian. I do really love World Anvil, but for the sort of rapid creation, quick notes approach that I'm taking right now, I think Obsidian kind of works better. Once the content is a little bit more finalized, I'll probably move it back into World Anvil to serve as sort of like a wiki for the page. I keep this root level note called home, which has a bunch of the content that kind of exists within my vault. It's used as sort of an index for the rest of the vault, especially for things that I'm still like in the midst of working on, or major links like this universe of Care one. Up at the top, I have my inspiration for this world. I store each note in here with a little bit of information about why it's important to me, what I like about it. So this one is a book. I've got a lot of different things in here that I kind of use for various things. Next up, I have the game. These are any of the sessions that I'm running. This is an old session, old campaign that I was running. I'm not actively running this anymore, but I started to port some of the notes that I had into here, mostly as an example of how I could use this. And then finally, we have the world, and this is sort of broken down as an atlas. So I have a note called Atlas that I've renamed here called the Universe of Care. Some information about like the gods and some of the main plot points that I'm going to have in the game, and just some of the stuff that I'm still actively working on. A little bit later, I'll go over all of the plugins and templates that I use, but for now, I'm going to walk through just some of the folders that I have and what they're used for specifically. Let's look at some of the folders that I use to organize my space. These first two folders, scripts and templates, are used to store things that are used by the vault and some of the plugins that I have. Currently, scripts doesn't have anything in it. I'm in the process of working on some user scripts to make this a little bit more useful. Templates has a number of templates. I'm also adding to these, but these are sort of the core pieces that I've needed so far. And these are used to generate files in other folders and kind of keep everything in a similar structure. Next up is the attachments folder. This is sort of a personal preference. I like to have a top level attachments folder. This stores any of the images that I copy and paste into my vault or anything that I want to upload. It's just a little bit easier to have them all top level so that you can look through your images if you want to and kind of know where they're stored, as opposed to being spread out throughout the notes. Once again, personal preference. You can also put them in the notes. Obsidian has settings for that. Campaigns is a list of my active campaigns. Same thing that's over here on the home note. If I click into this, this is a good time to maybe talk about one plugin that I use. It's this Waypoint Plugin. It is used to index any of the notes underneath this note here. So I use this in conjunction with a plugin called Folder Note, which just creates a note with the name of the folder. So this folder is named Campaigns. I also have a note named Campaigns that has this waypoint inside of it so that I can see the campaigns that I'm running. Within the Campaigns folder, I have a folder for each campaign that I'm running. And within each of those campaign folders, I have a sessions folder and a player's note. Anything else that I would want to toss in here would go in, but I use sessions both for planning and running my sessions, keeping the notes in the same place. This is sort of an intro to the world, some of the stuff I was working on originally. I'm going to rewrite some of this. We'll have a new intro in here. You can see that's why that's down there. But looking here, this is that Waypoint plugin again. If I go into this, you can see sessions. This is a list of the sessions that I've run. If I drop this down, you can see the sessions over here. I use another plugin to give these a little bit of style, just to differentiate what the notes are based on what they look like. If I click into one of these, this is old session notes, so it's not using the template currently, but I do have a template to run sessions as well. You can see down here, I sort of use the lazy DM prep to list out the characters, like how it's going to start, what the potential scenes are, any of the recaps, things like that. I also link to any other files that are useful within here. This one uses a different plugin. This is a little bit closer to my new way of doing things. So this is another session that I ran a long time ago that I'm sort of just importing into here. You can see I actually indexed the characters using another plugin called Dataview. Again, I'll go over all the plugins at the end. This lets me pull any of the PCs where their campaign is the name of this campaign. And then down here, I keep a list of stat blocks that I'm using. This links to things in the monsters folder. If I click into one of these, you can see I use another plugin to list out the stat blocks. This is super useful. We'll cover this later a little bit more. From the campaigns folder, we also have the players list. This also just uses the data table to list any of the players. Same code, just in here to make it really quick to grab any of the players' information that are in here. I can also add different things to this table. If I wanted to get like the player's HP, their passive perceptions, things like that, I could add those in here. From the campaigns folder, we'll jump into the inspiration folder. Again, these are just sort of quick notes, things that I think are interesting, things that I want to pull from to maybe pull into this campaign a little bit. This world is a little bit of a Arthurian legend inspired, but also some like Celtic god stuff. And then the technology of the world is sort of akin to where Eberron is, but uses a little bit of some of the concepts from like computer programming. So I keep all of those inspirations in here. If there's any notes that I want to make, anything I want to store, I just toss them in there. The next folder is this monsters folder. Within that, this just stores stat blocks and pages for monsters that I'm working on. Right now, there's only one in here. It's a skeleton. It links back to that campaign page that I showed earlier. This is a really cool plugin. It makes it really easy. If it's a named SRD monster, you can just type the name in and it'll automatically pull for that. So if I go over here and create a new note, we can call this, so if I rename this note to zombie, I'll show you real quick how my plugins work for this. So my template plugin. So I grab this and do template, open insert template model. We go to monster. This automatically pulls the name of the note and tries to put it into here. If it is an SRD monster, it automatically pulls in. This plugin also allows you to create custom stat blocks. So you're not just limited to the stat block that is in here. There's also a plugin that ties in with this, made by the same person who made the stat blocks, to allow you to roll dice, which is really nice. It lets you quickly roll things, especially when you are in the sessions folders. If you go to a session, if you go to a session note, and you've got your stat block in here, you can quickly open that. You can roll for it, get some data, you know, if you need to roll a hit, whatever. Kind of lets you do your entire campaign session management from within your notes. So moving back to the folders. The next folder I have is the NPCs folder. This just has a list of any of the NPCs that I've introduced, as well as some of the information about like where they live, what kind they are, if they're, you know, an NPC, if they're a BBEG, if they're whatever, and rating. Actually, this is some code that I just didn't remove from here. So you can see if I remove that, that actually gets rid of that there. You can rename things, which is kind of nice. So this is, I can rename this to location, and now that's their location. If I click on that, takes me to the world that their location is based on, which is in this world folder. And then just like NPCs, I have PCs. There's not a lot of data in here, just a little bit of information based from what my characters told me. At some point, I'm going to pull in some of the information from D&D Beyond that I use to have passive perception, maybe their initiative bonus, things like that, just to make it easy when I'm running sessions to get that information quickly, sort of run initiative in that way. And then finally, the last folder I have is this world folder. This contains all of the world building documents. This is the one that's the most fleshed out right now. You can see I have this atlas in here, which has information about the different races, the different pieces of the world that I've been working on. And like I said, I pulled a lot of this from World Anvil, some stuff that I had already worked on. So some of it still links to World Anvil. As I pull these out, I will make sure that they end up as new pages and new notes within here, just like I've done for orcs or any of these other creatures. So you can see this is sort of how I organize all of this information. keeping it into sort of top level folders that make it easy to link to different things. So this is the settlements. It lets me easily link to any settlement or location within something like the NPCs folder or the PCs folder. And finally, within here, I think the most interesting thing is this calendars note. So there is another plugin called Fantasy Calendars that makes it really easy to create calendars for your world. If I open up Fantasy Calendar, you can see I can open large Fantasy Calendar, and I have these notes that have information about each of the festivals and different things that I've sort of planned for the world. If I go forward, I only have a couple pulled in. I need to write up a couple more, but I think, where is it? There it is, Manan. Oh, the other event isn't pulled in right now. I'm still working on this, but for the most part, it makes it really easy to just pull up your calendar, have some information about the different events in your world. I can click into these, type out whatever. This is used by the Fantasy Calendar plugin to generate the calendar for you. Now that I've talked about the different folders, I'm going to talk a little bit about the different templates that I use. These are used to create structured file types so that everything in my vault is essentially the same. Jumping in first, let's look at the event template. It's a really simple one, just pre-fills some metadata that makes the Fantasy Calendar plugin work. Lets me easily, if I go into world, calendar, I can create a new note in here. It automatically pulls in that template and allows me to quickly fill out the dates for this event. And I could name this, new event. And then add that into here, and then I can rerun the calendar and it should show up on the day that it shows here. The next template is the monster template, and this is very simple. It's the same thing that I showed when I created a new monster, but based on the name of the file, we use this sort of template code to grab the name of the file, toss it here as the monster. The way it's really quick, if I want to grab a new monster, grab something that's in the SRD, I can just pick it up, toss it into the monsters folder, create a new note, and insert this template. NPC, this one just uses the type and the location. Type defaults to NPC, location is just empty. So lets me quickly pull in information about the NPCs, have them linked in the NPC table with their location and their type. Looking at a more in-depth template, this is the sessions template. This uses the data view to pull in the characters for the campaign. Currently is broken in the actual template view because this isn't actual code that Dataview understands, but once the template is generated, it will ask you for the name of your campaign, and then it will pull any of the PCs from the name of that campaign. That pulls in the different characters. This is actually out of order, but it's pretty easy to edit. I can just toss that in up there, pulls in the characters. Like I said, I use a sort of modified lazy DM system to run this. So I have a bit of information about the start of the session, what potential scenes there are going to be, the secrets and clues that are available, NPCs, any stat blocks that I think I'm going to run. While I'm doing this, I will also toss in new notes. So if I pull in a new session, if I'm running through a session, while I'm actually running the session, I will add any links in here that come up during the session. I will add any action items or notes. It's really easy to do checklists with Obsidian. You just do a dash space and then a bracketed box, and that makes a checkbox. This makes it really easy to pull out any action items or notes that you might have for to-dos from your sessions. I use action items a lot to remember things that I need to send to my players after the session. Once the session's done, I also then go back in and type up a little bit of a recap. Finally, I have a template for settlements. This one uses a lot more of the metadata. This allows me to quickly filter, search, and have different information about the different settlements in my world. So a lot of this is pulled from World Anvil because I already had a lot of this in World Anvil. So the type, the founding date, any alternate names that they have, the size, the population in general, who the ruler is, what the rank is, ruling organization, and then any NPCs that are in that world. If I come over here, if I look for the Oakland's Fall settlement, you can see all of the information here, and I have these linked so that you can go straight to the character from the tables. So once you pull these in, the tables can handle sort of pulling up who the ruler is. I use live preview mode, which lets you see sort of what the document looks like as you're writing, but you can also switch over to full preview mode by pressing Command E or Control E if you're on Windows. That shows now the different links and the different information as sort of a table up here. which just makes it easy. If I'm just reading things off, if I'm not writing any notes for this, it lets me quickly just grab this information and talk about it within my sessions. Finally, let's look at some of the plugins that I use to do all of the different things that I do within my vault. There are a lot of tutorials out there for how to use Obsidian, but the big thing is if you're going to use community plugins, you have to turn off safe mode. It's a little scary, but it's all right. I have about 23 plugins that I use. Some of them are more or less important than others. Some of them I just use for styling or really small things, but I still just sort of like to have them. So let's start here at the top. The first plugin that I use is Auto Link Title. When you paste something from the web, it will automatically try to grab the title of the page from the internet. It just makes it easy to add quick links without just having bare HTTPS links in your notes. Calendar, this allows me to create session notes that have dates associated with them and see which day the sessions fall on. This is different from the fantasy calendar. Looks kind of similar when you use it. It's in the sidebar, but it kind of just lets you have your sessions based on certain days, which is really nice. Checklist, this is a plugin I use with my session prep to add any action items that I need. Lets me pull out those action items from a number of files and show them on the right-hand side so I can see all of my different checklist items, all of my different action items from across a bunch of different files. Dataview is the plugin that I use to have the table views in some of my notes, the things like the settlements table, the NPCs table, that sort of thing. Dice Roller allows you to type out dice notation and roll dice based on that while you are in preview mode. So to show that off real quick, if I go into here and type dice 1d20, and then we switch over to preview mode, you can see that there is now a dice there. I can click that, roll that. It also works with the Dataview plugin, so you can use it if you need to quickly roll some dice within a table or something like that. Embedded note titles. This is a really simple plugin. This just shows the title of the note as a heading up here. You can see this isn't actually editable. This is because it's pulled from this note title, which just makes it really easy to see which note you're on, but without actually affecting the content of the note itself. Fantasy Calendar is the plugin that I showed off that allows you to create fantasy calendars within your world. It also allows you to import fantasy calendars from other worlds. So if you're running like an Eberron or a Forgotten Realms game or an Exandria game, you can just import those calendars, have them automatically in here. It also allows you to create events and different things. Folder note is the ability to have a root note that is the same name as a folder, so that when you click on it, you get this sort of Notion-like folder view. So these folders have notes associated with them, even though it actually creates a new note. I've got it set to hide the note in the folder. You don't have to do that. You could also have just like a monsters note underneath this, and when you click on this, it would open. Gallery is a plugin that I'm still experimenting with. I haven't quite figured out how I want to use it, and so it's not used in any of my notes currently, but once I have a little bit more of an idea of how to use this plugin, I'll come back and make an update to this video. Hider is a really simple plugin. It just lets you turn on and off different UI elements. Sometimes the things in Obsidian can be a little overwhelming, some things you just don't really need. It just makes it easier to just turn them off. Initiative Tracker is a really interesting plugin, also by the same person who made the Dice Roller and the Statblock plugin. It allows you to just add your initiatives to the sidebar, track who's going through combat. It's really nice for running combat from Obsidian. Metatable is a plugin that shows the front matter of your notes, so the tags and things like that, as a table when you are in preview mode. Notion-like tables, this just makes making tables in Markdown a little nicer. By default, tables in Markdown can be a little bit difficult to work with. This just makes it so you can basically create them from a visual view, similar to how you create them in Notion. Obsidian Leaflet is one that I haven't played around with a ton, but it allows you to embed maps, similar to like a Google Maps, but for your world with any images that you want. You can add markers related to notes, so if you want to list out where like your cities are or show off interesting points from your world, you can have it on a map. It's a really nice plugin. Outliner just makes your lists a little bit more powerful. So if you have a lot of checklists, if you're writing up your notes in sort of a bulleted list format, it makes it easy to just flip things up or down, similar to tools like Workflowy or Roam. Pain Relief adds a few nice things to pain history. Without it, it makes it a little hard sometimes to navigate around. It's not necessarily needed, but I find it is a little bit nicer to use within Obsidian than Obsidian's base pain navigation. Sliding panes is a plugin that allows your notes to stack horizontally, making it easy to have multiple notes open at the same time and scroll and view between them. So if I go into here and I open up a few different notes, you can see it puts it to the side here. And then if I click on this one, I can go in another one. It starts to stack these up this direction, which makes it a little bit easier. You know, if you're digging in, you're getting down to something like this. I'm now this far in, but I still have a history of the things that I was working on here. To get to this, you have to hold Control or Command while you're opening your notes. I think you can change that, but I prefer it that way. And as we close back, you'll see we end up back in some of the notes, the direction we were going. You gotta be a little careful when you're closing notes because sometimes you can close the one you didn't mean to. But for the most part, it just makes it a little easier to navigate those panes once again. Style settings is used to adjust the theme or plugins that you're working with and the styles that they generate in your Obsidian vault. It is most useful with the different themes, which I'll show off in just a minute, but it's also useful with this next plugin, Supercharged Links. This allows you to automatically style links depending on data within them and within their front matter. That's how I get these session links and settlement links to have a little emoji after them without the notes actually having that in the name. It also does it for any of the settlements that are in here. When it has a type of settlement, it knows that this is a note that should have the little emoji of a village next to it. It's really just a visual thing. It's not super necessary, but I like that it makes it a little easier to compare, especially if you have notes that have the same title. So for me, a lot of times there are things that are like a session note and a settlement note, and it might be, you know, the session is named a certain way, but the settlement is named the same way or something like that. It just makes it a little bit easier to differentiate what you're working with. Templater is a huge plugin for me. This is what I use to create all of the templates over here, fill them out with any of the code. Once I write some of the personal scripts that I have that are going to be in that top folder, Templater is the thing that lets you use those and run them. It's used to just generate new notes from templates, insert content into an existing note, all that sort of stuff. It's really, really useful. Timelines is another note that I haven't used a ton right now, but as I migrate some more of my stuff from World Anvil, I do want to move the timeline of my world into here. It works well with the Fantasy Calendar plugin. It works well with the events from that. It lets you basically just create a timeline view of a bunch of different notes with a specific combination of tags. So you could create a timeline of the history of your world up to a certain point. You could create a timeline of a specific set of events in your world, that sort of thing. TTRPG stat blocks. This is the plugin that I've showed off a lot. Makes it really easy to generate stat blocks in the Obsidian note. It can work, like I've said, with SRD content. It can work with custom monsters. You can pull in anything basically that you want from this. And finally, Waypoint. This is the plugin that I use to show the map of content on a folder note. So if I go into like the world, the Atlas folder note, you'll see this is a waypoint. It's really easy to use, easy to just toss in here, works with folder notes so that I can see just sort of a breakdown of all of the notes that I have within my system. Just a really easy thing to do. Finally, I just wanted to show off the themes window just a little bit. Obsidian has a ton of different themes that you can use, depending on your personal style, depending on what you like. I personally really like the California Coast and themes. I think they both look really good. Themes is very light when you have it on not dark mode. Things is based on the things to-do list, which is the to-do list that I use. Keeps things really nice and neat. You can see it's got some good colors. But when I'm not using that, I also like the California Coast. It helps me to differentiate between my different vaults a little bit as well. I use things in my main vault. This is my world vault, so I like to use something a little bit different like California Coast. But there are tons of themes to use, all sorts of different styles, all sorts of different things that you could want. Some of them look very fantasy, some of them look very modern, some of them are really cyberpunk. So depending on your setting, depending on your world, maybe you want to use a different theme. I personally sort of just like the ones that are simple, easy to read, easy to navigate. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see more of this kind of stuff, if you want to see more about the specific plugins that I use or the themes or any of that kind of thing, definitely let me know. I'm more than happy to dig into this. I've also got some videos coming out about how to use Notion and a few other tools. I'm also in the process of creating a Notion template that is super easy to download, use for world building and session prep, campaign running, all sorts of things, really focusing on this sort of idea of being a digital DM. Leave me a comment with your favorite digital tools. I would love to check them out and review them on the channel, go over how to use them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great week and stay wizardly.